Adrian, you are running podcast interviews, so what it's all about?
Well, the RSS has had ambitions for a little while to make use of the kind of media that's fairly readily available now. First of all, the thinking was to experiment with its use in lectures that people give, that some of the standard, ordinary and other types of meeting that the RSS puts on. Most definitely not to discourage people from attending so that they can just simply watch it on the television, so to speak, but in particular very much to make material and lectures and interesting talks available to those who find it very difficult to travel to wherever the meeting might be taking place. So that's been the first sort of experiment that we've conducted, and people can find on the RSS website already a number of ordinary meetings that have been recorded in that way, and can view the slides in addition to some audio that's the speaker delivering the talk, as it were.
Sounds like a really nice and useful idea. You are running interviews at the RSS conference as well, so what is the purpose? They would be different to the interview you'd be running for the RSS ordinary or other meetings, is that correct?
That's right. The idea now is to experiment a little bit with short interviews with people, and they may eventually become available if the filming goes well, so to speak, as we try this experiment, on the RSS website, or perhaps podcast through the new RSS news feed that's being created. And the idea is that there'll be short little snippets of interesting material that people will find it interesting to read, rather like, I suppose, an audio or a visual newsletter. Just as one might read interesting accounts of meetings and issues in RSS News, so now the newsletter is beginning to go electronic to a degree, and podcasting of short items is something that particularly perhaps I have to say our younger members would be familiar with, and our older members perhaps might wish to become acquainted with.
All right, so can you give maybe an example of a couple of interviews you've run at the RSS conference?
Yes, in fact, just before the RSS conference, I had the opportunity to interview two people. One is Peter Diggle, who towards the end of September will be reading a paper to the Royal Statistical Society, and it was a good opportunity just to have 5 to 10 minutes with Peter, asking him to sketch what the paper's about and why the issues are important. And we hope that that might become available on the website in advance of the meeting as a kind of audio trailer. Another example was an interview with Wolf Kendall, who's one of the directors of the APTS program, which is a postgraduate training activity. And Wolf was able just to explain where that had come from, what it's aiming to achieve, and so on. And at the conference itself, we're simply going to speak to a few people who are giving talks with interesting titles, or who would be able to tell us something of the work they're doing or issues that they're currently involved in.
Adrian, how do you find the difference between being interviewed and interviewing?
Good question. Well, the big advantage of doing the interviewing is that you get to ask the questions and you don't have to think up the answers. It's quite good fun too to bowl someone a googly, to use a cricketing phrase, and see how they cope with it, but that's rather mischievous. So being interviewed is much more stressful because you have to think a little bit on your feet, and you have to try to be coherent, which for many of us is a bit of a struggle.